James?
All right, it is Monday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. and I call the meeting, the special meeting of the Brainerd City Council to order. Mr. Administrator, can you call the roll?
Tony's not here. Stengline?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Chezak?
Yes.
O'Day?
Here.
Stunek?
Here.
Terry?
Here.
Bevins?
Here.
Bedeau?
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 4 is approval of the agenda. We're looking for a motion to approve by Chezak. Is there a second by Stunek? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. We have an agenda and we are underway. Item 5 is new business. Item 5A is considering a wage adjustment for our Public Utilities Director position. Chris, is this for you, or are we going to go right to Jeff?
Actually, we're going to go right to Mr. Weldon from
Mr.
GMP
Weldon, come on
Consultants.
up to the microphone. Please give us your name, and we need an address as well because we are on TV, and tell us what the issue is.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jeff Weldon. I'm your consultant from GMP Associates. I am at currently my office and my home is 12405 County Road 11, Sauk Center, Minnesota. So I want to thank you for retaining us again for the second time to do a search for you. And we're here to talk about one little detail that has arisen as a result of the meetings that we've had with the stakeholders. I'm pleased to tell you that the profile for the position of Public Utilities Director is nearing completion. It got returned to your staff today for some final editing, and we hope to launch that very soon for an advertising period of about 4 to 5 weeks. So very excited to get that done. One of the things we want to share with you tonight is a concern that we've identified is about the salary range. And one of the things, of course, that we look at. Thank you. One of the things that we look at carefully is our ability to compete in the market for salaries. And I know you had a committee that looked at this earlier and then throttled it back somewhat. In looking at a number of the issues that resulted from the stakeholder meetings that I had last week. As I mentioned in my memo, I met with a lot of people from the community and the utilities operation, and we had excellent meetings, excellent feedback. But one of the concerns that I think we're going to have is we all know the current contract is unsettled. Hopefully that'll be resolved very soon. But as you know, and as I've talked to a number of people, there are some lingering issues that will need to be addressed. Not unexpected issues when you go through an organizational change necessitated by a charter. But they will be issues nonetheless that the new occupant of this position will be faced with. Occupants or candidates will see that in one of two ways. They'll see it as a challenge that they're not up to and that they won't take on, and they will not apply for some of those reasons. But there will be other candidates out there as well, or applicants who will look at that and say, I realize that is a huge challenge, but one that is necessary and happens oftentimes with reorganization, and they'll want to take it on, and they'll see that as an attraction for the position. So it's an issue that cuts both ways. But my overriding concern, as I mentioned in my memo, is that the salary is not as robust as I think it should be or could be to attract a good group of candidates. And we are, as you know, in a very competitive field for these types of positions. Not a lot of mobility with department head positions such as these. So in order to be competitive, I'm asking you to consider going back to what your committee had recommended earlier, the pay schedule, which is enclosed in your packet, and that would provide for the annualized salary of $127,100 for step 1 up to $141,600 for step 4. So that is an increase, obviously, over what you're looking at right now. The major concern I have, folks, is that you recently went through a process of advertising, and you had that number out there, and unfortunately, it garnered disappointing results for you. So I'm thinking that something needs to be done to have a successful search going forward, and I think that big issue is going to be the salary adjustment. Well, I can't guarantee the results of applicants or who's going to apply or how many, but I think that salary range that your committee had looked at earlier will go a long way toward resolving that issue. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weldon?
Mr. Bevins?
Mr. Chesak?
Yes, when you talk about the committee, are you speaking of the the interviewing group or the Personal and Finance Committee? Because there was two different numbers. The group brought back to the P&F committee a number that got changed in committee and then brought to us for approval.
Certainly, that, Mr. Chesak, that predates my involvement, so I'll let Chris answer that.
Yeah, Chris?
That was the Public Utilities Work Group that met, that originally made that recommendation.
Which got changed in P&F to a lower amount,
Yes.
recommended to us. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Weldon.
Thank you very much.
Anybody care, the recommendation is to, let me read it to you. Looking for a motion to adjust the 2024 wage grid for the Public Utilities Director position as recommended by Mr. Weldon.
So moved.
Motion by Terry, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chesak. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thanks, Mr. Weldon.
Thank you.
Next up is item 5B, consider a creation of a strike contingency plan work group. I believe this is our city administrator, Nick Broyles. Anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. So as the council is well aware, the Public Utility Union and City Hall have been in mediation for over 45 days. That does meet the minimum requirements, so the union could file for a strike if they so choose at this time. Staff does recommend that we establish a strike contingency plan work group that would consist of myself, the city administrator, HR director, applicable department heads, 2 city council members, and 2 members of the Public Utilities Commission to be identified by Commission President Matten. This work group is consistent with League of Minnesota Cities guidance, and the primary role of this committee would be to coordinate the strike plans of various city departments, provide strategic planning on how operations will continue or cease during a strike, serve as a resource to others at the city, and to provide a central command post for communications. So staff is asking for a motion from council to establish the strike contingency plan work group as described.
Any questions of staff on the recommendation? Mr. Chesak?
Yes, who will be taking the lead on this group, if you would be so willing to opine on that? Or is that decided after the group is formed?
I think we'll talk about it as a group when the group is formed. I don't foresee this as having a necessary overt leader of the group. We're going to have the experts at the table, and we can talk through different contingency planning for if the strike occurs. So we can establish that informally as a group, but I don't think we have identified who's going to be in charge of the group.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Okay, Mr. O'Day?
I just want to make sure that communication with whoever's not on, I don't know who will put on there from council, but that communication would be extended to the rest of the council as well. I know this would probably be more of a day-to-day operation type of group, so instead of calling meetings every day to deal with the changes, I assume that's why we would want to do this.
So if I understand Councilman O'Day properly, please clarify if I don't. Are you asking for more than, in other words, are you asking for a public meeting when this group gets together?
Not necessarily, but if the rest of the council would want to get information about what the strategy is going forward, day to day, we could reach out to, say, the administrator or somebody in the group.
We would absolutely distribute all information consistent with law and policy.
Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to we're gonna move yes or no on the establishment of the strike contingency plan work group. Is there a motion to
So moved.
approve? Motion by Chesak, is there a
Second.
second? Second by Stengline. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We're looking for 2 council volunteers. Tiffany Stengline has her hand up, and Kara Terry has her hand up. Anybody else would like to be considered for this? We have 2.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chesak?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chesak was also considered being on it. Anybody else? Okay, so we have 3. I don't know the best way to do this.
I can step down, Mr. Chair, if you want.
Or
Okay,
leave
Kara
Jeff
Ter-
as an alternate.
Kara Terry has agreed to step down. So we're looking for a motion to approve Jeff Chesak and Tiffany Stengline.
Just a second.
We are on the same committee, so there is that
Yep.
issue.
That's probably not a good idea, just as far as the rules
I
of
just
the
think
club.
there was some mention of the liaison to the, from the council to the commission, I believe, was suggested. Was that not in that memo from the league? Mr. Broyles? I think it's in our packet, so I thought it'd probably be my position to,
As liaison to public utilities?
it is mentioned in the memo from the league, so that suggested that that individual be, so that's why I felt I should probably do that.
Hang on. That does make sense to me as well.
If I may, Mr. President?
Yes.
I'll just read I think the statement that Councilman Chesak is referring to. It says, "In some cities where the mayor or a council member liaison is actively involved in the city's operational affairs, that individual should also sit on the central strike committee."
Yeah, well, that makes sense, but I also understand what Mr. Chesak has said with the 2 of them being on SP and W. It doesn't, it may not be a legal issue, but it doesn't look good, right?
I would defer to the council on that, I guess, who you want to
We are
appoint.
a standing committee, so.
Right.
this- Would we be discussing issues that relate to our business as committee members? I guess, could you be in that, I don't have any, I don't see any way we'd be discussing safety and public works issues, although this is a public work that would be, even though we don't really have much on our agenda regarding this particular bargaining unit, because that's the Public Utility Commission items
Right.
specifically, so.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, it's my understanding this isn't regarding one union, but more citywide. We'd be looking at all departments and all contingency plans, so there would be some public works discussion and
Yes, sir, I think it's appropriate in light of this guidance from the league that not only would we go through this process for the public utilities union, but eventually we would want to have something discussed for all of our bargaining units.
I think there should be one from each committee. But I'm gonna look for somebody to make a motion. You've got 3 people who have said they would volunteer to do it. Anybody care to make a motion on 2 of them, or any 2 you want to?
Can I make a comment?
You sure can.
I think it would be cleaner to have one person from each committee. Then there's
agreeing with me.
no red flag, no nothing.
Sure, but you don't wanna make a motion.
Yeah.
I think you should.
Okay, I make a motion that we have one person from each committee, and at this point,
Pick names, Kevin.
I'm going there.
Oh goodness, Peaches, the bar's gonna close at 1. Go ahead.
Mr. Chesak and Carrie Terry for the committee. Is that good enough?
We have a motion. Is
Amen.
there a second?
I'll second.
Second by O'Day. We have a motion by Stunek, a second by O'Day. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, same sign. Thank all 3 of you for volunteering.
I'm not saying another word.
Okay, ever. Yeah. We're already 4 minutes past due. Next up is item 5C, consideration of a conditional use permit and variance request for a mixed-use building at 805 Laurel Street I believe this is Mr. Krambeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. So DW Jones has requested conditional use permits for a mixed-use multifamily building supporting commercial space along with 78 units of housing. The CUP requests are for the construction of a mixed-use building with 5+ residential units, also to exceed the height in the town center district, and to allow for residential use on the ground floor as part of the TC overlay district. The applicant has also requested a variance from the landscape requirements for tree and shrub numbers. The applicant proposes 3 commercial spaces on the first floor along A Street South with residential units to the east side to satisfy the requirements of the Town Center Overlay District. They also propose 2 additional commercial units along Laurel Street for the total of 5. The residential units consist of 12 studio apartments, 29 one-bedroom units, 9 one-bedroom units with a den, and 28 two-bedroom units. There were questions regarding parking and concerns from a neighboring business at the last Planning Commission meeting. The proposed building is required to provide a total of 83 parking spaces per the off-street parking ordinance. The applicant is proposing 65 underground parking spaces to go along with the 25 surface parking spaces for a total of 91 spaces. The applicant is also requesting a variance based on the 0-foot setback for the number of trees and shrubs to be planted. Typically, an apartment or a unit would be required to have 4 shrubs per unit. The applicant is proposing replanting trees in the boulevard and a landscape plan with shrubs and perennials around the parking lot. Staff did recommend a few additional plantings in the parking lot for screening. So with that, recommendation is for approval of the CUP request for the construction of a mixed-use building with 5+ residential units to exceed the height in the town center district and to allow for residential use on the ground floor with the condition that an additional 6 shrubs be placed on the east side parking lot planting bed for additional screening. And number 2, to approve the variance request from the landscape requirements for trees and shrubs. I can answer any questions regarding the land use application request. The applicant is also here.
Thank you, Mr. Krambeck. Is there any questions of staff? Any questions of staff? Mr. Chesak?
Yes, one of the planning commissioners, I thought, brought up a good point about pets, and I don't believe that their thoughts regarding a small patch of grass would be effective, because if you know anything about what dog urine does to grass, it doesn't live long. As a matter of fact, well, I won't get into that. But, so my question is, where the bushes and trees are proposed to be planted, is there going to be ground that is not covered with some sort of asphalt or cement? Are there just going to be holes in the surface area there, or is it going to be a grassy area where the trees and shrubs are planted as well?
Mr. Krambeck?
So based on the landscape plan, especially in the parking lot area, there are spaces in between the shrubs. Can't guarantee that those are the spots that are going to be used. There's also boulevard space. But based on the landscape plan, there would be spaces in between the shrubs. I'm sure it'd either be filled with rock or mulch.
The reason I ask President Bevins is
Yes.
because when people have dogs, their dogs typically will choose, or they'll choose to take their animals on a place other than a hard surface to relieve themselves. And I know right in that area, one of the closest places for a grassy area currently is across the street, just south on Laurel, across Laurel Street at the BN Credit Union. They've put a lot of time and effort into having their boulevard there, a very nice grass boulevard that they've put a lot of time and effort into. So if we see in the future that because there are pets allowed, and there could be numerous dogs, we have a boulevard that's been well-maintained. I know it's the city's property, but at the same time, they have spent a lot of time themselves and effort keeping that very nice. And I'd hate to see that get into jeopardy because dogs are being taken across the street. It's pretty path of least resistance to find that area. And I don't know how we could ever control that. So that's one of my concerns. And I wanted to ask the developer if they ever considered no pets at this particular location.
Mr. Chesak, I wasn't going to call the developer up, but I will, but then we kind of have to allow anybody to come up.
Well,
Okay, all right, just so you know. If I may get the developer or the petitioner to come on up, state your name and address the pet issue.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Andrew DeShano with DW Jones. I live at 7015 County 50, Northwest Akeley, Minnesota. And we have thought about that pet issue. You know, people have pets and we allow them. And it was brought up. Our first thought was to have a small space on the west side of the parking lot that we could dedicate with some grass, but as you mentioned, you know, with a small pad with a lot of pets, that may not last long. One other thought we've had is instead of doing grass, to have some type of artificial turf that we can keep clean, and that's not going to degrade with continual use. And unfortunately, given the size of the lot and everything, there's not a great spot to put a big, you know, fenced-in pet area. But we do think if we did some type of artificial turf with a floor drain in it, that we would be able to help address that.
Okay.
Well,
Yes, Mr.
may I-
Chesak. Yep.
you're thinking about that, but there's no decision been made. Is that what I understand? I heard you say you're thinking about that or considering these things?
Well, we've identified the spot, I guess it would be the northwest part of the parking lot where we would be able to put that. You know, I know some of the questions and concerns are in regards to parking, and so we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. We haven't updated our plans with it yet, but we do intend to do to add something.
Do you have any limitations on the size, a limit of a size of a dog perhaps in your resident rules handbook?
We do. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what that is. I could find out and let you know, though.
Well, I guess if we were going to ask you to do something specific, we would, at this time, be doing that if we're going to issue a conditional use permit. I think anybody think it's incorrect here? I think if you had a limit on dog size of 20 or 25 pounds, that might, because if somebody comes in there and has a couple of Great Danes or Rots or something that weigh 100 pounds, it makes, I think, the whole environment uncomfortable. So anyway, so I don't know how we could
I'm going to ask Mr. Kramvik right now. Mr. Kramvik, I think this is actually more part of the variance request than the conditional use. If we wish to add a limitation or an insistence on at least small green space, would that not be part of the variance request, or would that be part of the conditional use permit as Mr. Chesak suggested?
It could be done as either or. Both of them could potentially affect neighboring properties based on the overall design, so certainly could be a consideration under a conditional use as well. The variance is talking about trees and shrubs, so maybe, to me, it'd be probably almost more appropriate under the conditional use
Under the
permit.
conditional use. So it could be, the conditional use could be altered right now, correct, Mr. Kramvik?
There could be, city council could consider adding an additional stipulation or condition to the conditional use
Okay.
permit.
Either for green space and/or size limitation on dogs?
So it's a land use application, I would say for sure. For the green space, I haven't seen conditional use permits with dog sizing, but, that could be, potentially considered a nuisance to neighboring properties. The green space, I think, would be a little bit cleaner for a land use application if you wanted to go that route.
But we could try both. We have an attorney, right?
We do.
also have Andrew right here. Mr. Chesak, you have the floor. Tell me what you want to do.
I'd like to see a green space and a size limitation on the dog.
Would you like to amend the proposed conditional use permit to include some green space and size limits on dogs?
Yes, I would like to make an amendment to that and include a green space area for dog relief or animal relief. I kind of have a hard time with the size because I guess, okay, and then have a dog limitation size of 25 pounds. I'm just a little trouble with the size because I don't know what they're working with.
How about based on the attorney's approval as well?
That'd be based on the attorney's approval as well. Thank you.
Okay. Would there be a appropriate sizing for green space in this circumstances, Mr. Kramvik, like the size of a one parking space or?
Yeah, I would say potentially maybe 2 parking spaces if city council did want to consider that, potentially 1, but maybe consider it in parking space size. That'd be the easiest way to add a condition.
If I may, one thing we're talking about is green space, and I said green is not going to work if we use natural. So if he wanted to do something that's green.
Pet
with-
space.
A pet relief space, right.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to have my wording say.
About 2 parking lots sound about right.
About the size, yeah, approximately 2 size. There's my motion. Thank
Okay.
you For your help.
Y'all understand, Mr. Chesak is looking to amend the proposed conditional use permit to include a 25-pound limit on dog size based on attorney's approval, as well as approximately a 2 parking space size for pet relief. Is there a second? I'll ask a second time, is there a second? And the offer to amend the conditional use permit dies for lack of a second. Thank you. As long as we've got Andrew here, any other discussion or questions of Andrew, or may I send him back to a seat?
This is a question for Andrew.
Please, Tiffany.
How big is that spot that you have currently been thinking about?
So I guess I don't,
It's that little box, right? In the
Right.
upper.
and I think, because we've, I guess from the last meeting to now, we haven't had time to update anything. But I would say, the size of a parking stall would fit in there, and we can make that work without losing parking spaces. And we could make that work. So I think a typical parking stall is 9 by 20, I would say. Fair size,
180 square feet.
square feet.
Anything else, Tiffany, or would you like to make an effort at amending the conditional use permit? You have the floor. Hearing none, I'll ask if there's anybody else who has any comments or questions. Andrew's here. We've got staff.
I have a comment, Mr. Bevins.
Yes, Mr. Chesak.
Yeah, this is our last shot. I mean, if we're going to sit there and, not be distracted by the shiny object here, folks, we should try and do something now before we can't. So, and the way we get that done is if there's a motion, you make a second, then you can talk about it all night long, of course, up to the president's wishes. But it's frustrating to see a motion made and nobody wants to talk about it. I guess it's that bad of an idea when I hear also commission members on the planning and zoning saying the same thing. And that's all it takes. You don't have to vote for something if you second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak. Any further questions of staff or the petitioner? Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, so we're looking at 2 actions. The first one is the approval of the conditional use permit request for the construction of a mixed-use building with 5+ residential units to exceed the height in the town center district and to allow for residential use on the ground floor with the condition that an additional 6 shrubs be placed on the east side parking lot planting bed for additional screening. Anybody wish to move on that one?
So moved.
Motion by Stengline, second by Johnson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
That motion carries. And the second item is the approval of the variance request or not from the landscape requirements for trees and shrubs. Anybody wish to make a motion on the variance request?
I move that we approve the variance request.
Motion by Stengline. Is there a second by Terry? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up is item 5D, considering a resolution authorizing the city of Brainerd to act as legal sponsor for the 805 Laurel, Minnesota Workforce Housing Development Grant. That's Mr. Krambeck. Anything you'd like to add to what is in our packet?
Thank you, Mr. President. So D.W. Jones would like to apply for the Minnesota Workforce Housing Grant, which is allocating $39 million to construct workforce housing in rural communities like Brainerd. The grant requires the municipality to sign for the grant rather than the developer. D.W. Jones is requesting the city sign the application on their behalf for the proposed 805 Laurel Street development project. Staff did send a minor update this afternoon, adding Cub Foods as another business that is in support of the application. I can answer any questions. Obviously, the developer can answer questions, or Eric Charpentier of the HRA can. And I'll turn it over to council.
Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Any questions of staff on the workforce housing development sponsorship? Mr. Chesak?
Yeah, is the resolution up there for everybody to look at? If you could read the,
It is not, now it is.
up there?
Yep.
Could you look at the very second part? It's right at the beginning where it says, it indicates it's unanimous approval of the city council. You see that?
I don't.
Yeah, third line.
Third line down.
Very much, Gabe.
Yep.
Okay, does that mean we have to pass it unanimously?
Mr. Kramvik?
The grant writer, I believe, is the one that filled out the application. You may be able to answer that if there's a requirement for it to be unanimously approved. Otherwise, it could certainly be edited before signatures if it was not unanimously approved.
Come on up, Andrew.
All right.
Thank you.
It doesn't need to be, I guess it would, whatever would pass the council. So, if from your guys' end, it needed to be unanimous, but as far as the program goes, it wouldn't require that. They have a template online that Minnesota Housing puts out, and that's part of the language that they have in there, but I don't think it would require it to be unanimous, just as long as it was approved.
So you think that might be part of the template?
Right.
Okay. We'll see what the vote is, if there's anything. You don't know, do you, Eric?
My understanding is that it would not need to be a unanimous vote of the council for the city to move forward or a requirement for Minnesota Housing.
Okay. And if I may ask one more question of staff, and I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Chesak. If we don't pass it unanimously, I presume we can correct that resolution before we send it off.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Mr. Chesak, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. That leads into a couple of other items here, what you just said, Mr. Bevins. I'm sure a representative here from D.W. Jones, that when you put an application like this that you're asking the city to apply for on your behalf, you want to put your best foot forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I have a few questions. In the, I believe it is the actual application that we were provided with. It's called the narrative certification. Is that the application? Anybody over here know that?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
That is up on the screen
Okay,
now.
thank you. So as we go through this, the retail district is where the services and hotels are. How many hotels are in downtown Brainerd in the retail district?
I don't know.
There aren't any, so you need to change that. Historic downtown Brainerd. Historic downtown is where the public parks and beaches are. I'm not sure we got any beaches in downtown either, especially in the historic region, so you should probably correct that. Okay. Okay, when you talk about 805 Laurel being handicap accessible, how many units are going to be accessible? Do you know?
Accessible?
Yes.
So we'll, the plans will meet all the ADA requirements.
When you're air conditioning, is that through wall? Are they going to be provided, or will the tenant have to provide those?
They'll be provided.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, you have a typo here. It says 805 Laurel will help fill the need for, I don't know what that word is. CRIT is supposed to be critically. So you want to put your best foot forward, correct? I'm helping you.
Yep. No, I appreciate it.
And then you have, Will any of the units have income restrictions? Well, it says yes. Mr. Bevins?
Yes, sir.
We've been told last year this is going to be market rate. This tells me it's not entirely market rate. I understand things may have changed, okay? But it's not market rate. As we were told, it's been publicized, and I've told numerous people, we don't want that low-income housing. It's not low-income, it's market rate. I can't tell you the number of people I've told that this is purely market rate, and this tells me it's not if you look at those numbers. I'll move on. Okay. Okay, need of housing. This is where you need to make some corrections. I'm sorry, I go down here a little farther. Okay, it talks about the size of the spaces of the different units. Talks about kitchenette, office. Okay, then we look at E, it says number of units. Now, this particular portion I'm going to read is in your document twice, however, the numbers are different. Primary market, the primary reason the market is not filled with housing needs is simple. COVID interest rates, blah, 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 increased everything, you're about 3.5, that's where they were prior to COVID, about 3.5%. The higher cost of money today reduces our leverage, borrowing capacity by $1,620,000. And then construction rates increased 30%. It says to affect the cost of this by $3,150. If you go down further, explain, this is the header, explain why the market is not filled or will not fill documented need for workforce housing. And you have the same exact sentence, paragraph. Housing needs is simple. The primary reason the housing needs are simple. COVID interest rates, for similarly, that's the wrong word. Similar is the word you want there. 3.5% reduces your borrowing by $2,644,000. That's different than the one above. This is in the same document, same wording. And it also says that instead of $3,150, it says that 30% construction costs increased your cost by over $5 million. So if I'm putting my best foot forward, I'm cleaning this up before it gets submitted. And I think that's your job to give to our staff, because we're asking our staff to do this work along with you. And I would feel like a complete idiot if this got passed and nobody changed that wording, and then somebody goes in and says, what did you guys do here? How could you approve that? Didn't you read that? I'm asking you, did you read this?
Yes, I did.
Did you miss all that?
We know that there's those mistakes. They've been pointed out to us, and we will make the necessary adjustments to it. We've got a couple other applications in, and unfortunately, we missed a couple things, but we will go through it with your recommendations and make those changes.
You also have the word unit spelled wrong in there, where you talk about the different number of units. Go back to that one, so make note of that. The I believe, is missing. I'm sorry to be, this is a big deal, okay? You know it, we all know it. We talk about putting our best foot forward. I want to make sure we're getting a good deal here. We're getting a good job. And when I see this, frankly, it's scary, okay? I'm asked to apply as a city council member. That's my job, to make sure these things are correct. And I didn't see anybody else raising their hands here to ask about any of this. No pun intended. So if we could get that corrected, and also the money you're asking for is over 6.8 million, and it's a 2-to-1, what is it, a $1 for every 2 match? Are we gonna achieve that?
2-to-1 match.
2-to-1 match. So That means we give $1 for every 2 you receive?
So every $1 of local contribution, you can ask for 2 from the state.
So we're providing essentially over 3.4 then.
So how we've been able to get to that is a mix of the redevelopment TIF, the Crow Wing County Housing Trust, the Main Street Grant, the waiver of the SAC and WAC fees, and energy rebates.
Okay. That's all I got, Mr. Bevins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak. Any other questions of the applicant or staff? Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right. Staff is recommending the approval of the resolution authorizing the city of Brainerd to act as the legal sponsor for the 805 Laurel Workforce Housing Project with the corrections to the application that Mr. Chesak suggested. Anybody care to make a motion on that?
So moved.
Motion by Johnson, second by Terry. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Administrator, can you call the roll?
Stengline?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Chesak?
No.
O'Day?
Yes.
Stunek?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Bevins?
Yes, that resolution is adopted. I'm gonna make sure though it's a 6-1, just so there's no concern over that unanimous section.
Duly carried.
Thank you. Next up is item 5E, which is consideration of an authorization for the city of Brainerd to act as an applicant for the Brainerd Oaks Outlot F for the Minnesota Workforce Housing Development Grant. Mr. Kramvik, anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Level Contracting is requesting the city sign an application on their behalf for a proposed Outlot F development of the Brainerd Oaks subdivision. Planning Commission considered this development at their April 17th meeting. The agenda item was an opportunity to provide comments to City Council regarding the proposed development, as there is not a formal land use application. Staff included comments from the Commission in the agenda request. The applicant is proposing 9 duplexes, which equates to a total of 18 units and 4.2 dwelling units per acre density. This property is located in the CN2 Contemporary Neighborhood 2 zoning district, which permits the construction of duplexes. However, a PUD will be required in the future as the applicant is proposing common property with slightly altered setbacks and code requirements from the CN2 district. So with that, staff recommends to approve authorization of the City of Brainerd to act as the applicant for Brainerd Oaks Outlot F for the Minnesota Workforce Housing Development Grant. The applicant was not able to quite have that application ready at this time. At this time, I'll turn it over to Eric. He can expand on ownership, history of the property, as well as explain the amount the developer is asking for. And the applicant and developer is also here as well.
Sure. Mr. Charpentier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Members of the council, just a real brief history. Outlot F is a parcel that is owned by the Brainerd HRA currently. Our HRA board has in recent months looked to find a way to better utilize this outlot other than just green space. Originally, when the Brainerd Oaks subdivision was being planned out, this lot was purchased by the HRA with the intention to have this as a parkland green space with the city of Brainerd. In the ensuing years, we have come to understand that the park board is not interested in this land anymore. We have gone to other adjacent property owners to see if they would be willing to take that as a donation or to purchase it to no avail. And as the end of the Brainerd Oaks Brainerd Oaks development has kind of come into focus now, we are looking for a way to best utilize that land. We do believe, and our board believes, that having additional housing units built out there is the highest and best use of that land currently. That's how we get here. Our board has agreed to convey this 4.3 acres to the Crow Wing County HRA, who has a current purchase and redevelopment agreement with Level Contracting, with the assumption that they will then pass that 4.3 acres along to Level Contracting to include it in that purchase and redevelopment agreement, so they can go ahead and develop it as is shown on the screen for your viewing. As the developer has continued in on that, in this process, they see that there are some challenges with the historic funding that is available with the state of Minnesota with the Bring It Home initiative last year for housing specifically. It's an opportunity for the developer to take advantage of those dollars, get some of those dollars locally here to help with some of the site improvements that will be needed to build upon that outlot. With that, again, same grant program that we talked about in the previous applicant, 2-to-1 match. So every local dollar that they're able to come up with in kind can then be requested for $2 with Minnesota housing. With the land being conveyed to the developer, there's a certain value that can be attributed to that. The developer has also in front of our board this coming Wednesday a request for some additional funding. We will know the outcome of that as of Wednesday, but we do know that based off of what is max available currently with the requests, that their max grant request would be about $348,000 to Minnesota Housing. And that is if our Brainerd board takes action at the highest level that they could. With that, I would certainly cede the floor back to you, Mr. President, and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Charpentier. So we've got 2 staff members that have given us information on this request, the developers here. Any questions of staff?
Mr. Bevins.
Mr. Chesak.
Level took this over from, not the original, but a second developer. Is that correct? Does anybody know that?
That is correct.
Okay. Is that, and Level's had this, what, 4 years now?
Maybe a little bit longer than that, but 4 to 5, I would think.
Do we know how many approximately properties were developed in the first 2 developers in this Brainerd Oaks project?
Councilman Chetak, I do not have those numbers available.
But would it be fair to say that currently Level has exceeded their expectation, your expectations, even as HRA, and followed the guidelines that everything has been outlined as far as their agreement with the city goes, or HRA goes, providing the development out there?
What I would say is that Level Contracting has built ahead of schedule in the purchase and redevelopment agreement, so they are certainly advancing quicker than what has been requested, so yes.
That's all I have for now, Mr. Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak. Any other questions of staff? Hearing none, the staff recommendation is to approve the authorization.
I move to approve the authorization of the application, grant application to workforce housing.
Is this a resolution as well? No. This one is just a regular motion. We have a motion by Chesak to approve the application. Is there a second? By O'Day. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I want to say I'm going to vote in favor of it. You know, as the liaison to the HRA, we've been trying to divest ourselves of this property for years and years and just haven't been able to. It's exciting that Level Contracting and Monty are stepping up and trying to use this 4 acres for an infill development project. And I don't know if any of you have driven through Brainerd Oaks in the last number of years, but the work they've done out there over the last 6-8 years has been just transformational. It's been great, and I look forward to seeing what they can do on this kind of landlocked lot.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6, we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second by O'Day. Is that what I heard? Yes. All right. Any discussion on the adjournment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thanks for letting me talk.